Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com. And Cecil, 2 years ago last night, that very band that brought us back in, Soundgarden, played the Tuscaloosa Amphitheater.
They did, and of course, one of the very last shows for Chris Cornell. So a memorable night, definitely.
Less than 2 weeks after that show, if I recall, we lost Chris Cornell. So bittersweet, no doubt about it, when you think back on that performance. Nothing bittersweet about the performance of the Alabama softball team over the weekend and wrapping up that Southeastern Conference regular season title down at LSU. I know you were on hand for the series, and we're seeing some just awards here. When you talk about Coach of the Year and Pitcher of the Year and Freshman of the Year, Cecil, it looks like.
Well, first of all, Coach of the Year, I don't know how you possibly could have gone. The team that was picked 8th won the league by 4 games in a 30-game schedule. It'd be kind of tough to, that's not to say there aren't some other coaches who did a good job, but I would think Murph was probably unanimous. To have 2 pitchers is honored. Sarah Cornell and then Montana Fouts. That's unusual. Usually it's one dominant pitcher per team, but it's well deserved. And then Bailey Hempel, of course, had a great year as a power hitter. So very well deserved honors. I'll be interested to see the tournament format is so fast and so single elimination, which is a little unusual. But it'll be interesting to see how they play. They certainly can line up 3 pitchers and have a chance to win that event too. So we'll see how starting Thursday how that performs. And
I'm greedy, Cecil. I think Bailey Hempel could have easily been your SEC Player of the Year.
Sure,
I mean, we're talking about someone who hit 372, 22 bombs, and 69 RBI. It could have been a clean sweep of all of the awards, Cecil.
It could have, but when you have a season that's as dominant as Alabama had, that can happen, even in a softball league that's as good as the SEC. So it'll be interesting to see how they play in the tournament. I'm looking forward to that.
And that's, by the way, not to take anything away from SEC Player of the Year Abbey Cheek, who had an outstanding season in her own right and did some damage to Alabama here in Tuscaloosa a couple of weekends ago in the Wildcats series win over the Crimson Tide. So, Cecil,
sure,
let me ask you this: when
LSU
you look at this,
Sanchez is a great player, and there were there were several around the conference.
But you said it. I mean, to have 3 of the 4, from the coach to the pitcher to the freshman, in a league like this, I don't know if you see that all that very often. I'm guessing maybe Florida's done it here of late, possibly, but there's a lot of talent dispersed, as we know, across the Southeastern Conference. Cecil, I know we talked about some horse racing last week with the Kentucky Derby, between Omaha Beach having to withdraw from the race after we spoke with you on Tuesday of last week to Maximum Security being disqualified as the winner. Have you ever seen anything? I guess we haven't seen anything like that, especially in a Kentucky Derby, but a Triple Crown type race anyway.
I guess the only time I've seen anything like that is when Jerry Lawler finally won the AWA title from Nick Bockwinkel. But they held the title up, Travis. You may be shocked to hear that video replay shows that Nick Bockwinkel had his foot on the bottom rope when he was pinned, and so yes, they took Jerry's title away from him.
They had to put it before the Executive Council of Mid-South Wrestling.
They did. So I hope Maximum Security isn't as angry as Jerry Lawler was. Of course, the reason that's history, and we'll drop wrestling, but the reason that's history is the title was held up, and so in a couple of weeks, the great Nick Bockwinkel, by the way, the underestimated heavyweight champion, came back for the rematch, with suspended title and so forth, and that's where Andy Kaufman interfered in the championship with Jimmy Hart. Andy Kaufman interfered in the championship match in that long arc, that long Andy Kaufman storyline in Memphis.
Oh,
was connected with that. So
it was hot, that storyline too. A lot of
probably for non-wrestling fans, probably the greatest storyline that carried on over to Letterman and so forth ever. Certainly one of the most memorable. If you're a wrestling purist, it's not what you don't like to see the Hollywood celebrities, but Andy played it for over a year. Unbelievable story arc that they had. So that's why that's what that reminded me of. But that's a little different scenario. The horses are both fine. They're unconcerned about who got taken down in that situation. But the bettors are not fine, and a lot of racing fans are not. And what happens is it would be a little bit like having an ending in the Super Bowl where an official's call overturned it. All your experts are watching, but also all your casuals. The biggest event for your casual fans. So you have a lot of different opinions and questions about what happened and so forth. A few things. Omaha Beach being out probably changed. You can't go back and change time, but it might have been a different race with a strong front runner like Omaha Beach. Some of those, I don't know if they'd have gotten as bunched up if some horses had to go chase a stronger leader than we had in this race. Second, I've always, and this goes back to 1975. This is nothing new, but boy, those 21, 22 horse fields are tough. I mean, you're going to have some traffic, and you're going to have some bumps and bruises. And third, there are levels of where you can say there was a foul and so, and it does happen in horse racing, but a lot of times it's the horse that finished ninth in a 22 horse field that gets taken down, and so it doesn't affect anything. So it's quite a controversial ending, and a lot of money at stake. So we may end up in court, or who knows. But congratulations to Country House for the Kentucky Derby. I hate to see his team have to have the biggest asterisk in horse racing ever.
And now we're seeing, Cecil, that Country House, according to the Daily Racing Form, reporting right now, Country House will not run in the Preakness on May the 18th. If he does skip the race, he would be the first Kentucky Derby winner to do so since Grindstone in 1996, which leads me to, as much attention as this is brought to the sport, what type of storylines are we looking at potentially for the Preakness? More about who's not going to be there than who is?
I guess, and you take the Triple Crown. I would have been. It would have been beyond stunning for Country House to be a Triple Crown horse. I don't know. It's such a business now. I mean, it's always been a business, but it's such a business now, and maybe they feel like his value as Kentucky Derby winner is there's no reason to risk that in terms of future stud fees and so forth. Maybe he's just a little bit off his feed, as they say about horses. They say he's got a cough or some kind of illness. So that's a shame. It's a shame not to have him run, because for one, what you do have, as we say, any publicity is good publicity, right? And so you would have had a lot of interest in him just to see if he ran. Even people expected him to run 8. It's unfortunate that he's not going to run.
Cecil, let's talk about some college football with you here on a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. We're ranking Alabama's toughest road games for the 2019 college football season. That list, obviously, we're not including the neutral. It wouldn't rank very highly anyway with Duke over in Atlanta. But in terms of true road games, you know this, South Carolina in September, followed by Texas A&M, and then the November duo of Mississippi State and also Auburn. How would Cecil Hurt today on May the 7th look at those 4 road games in terms of difficulty right now?
I think A&M is going to be tough. Huge crowd. I'll be interested to see what kind of start they've gotten off to, and their schedule is so, obviously with Clemson and with Georgia, so ridiculous. But Auburn is always sort of what it is, in terms of a tough place for Alabama to play. Don't know how their year is going to go. Don't know how their quarterback situation is going to be, but they're like the armies in Game of Thrones. When the fog is thickest, that's when they seem to be at their best. When you don't know what they're going to have, when you don't know what to expect. So those are 2 really, really difficult road games. South Carolina, anybody that's followed it for a long time remembers the last trip to Columbia. So who knows? They've got an experienced quarterback. They've got Will Muschamp. They don't have super high expectations, probably even less expectation than Auburn this year. But I don't think anybody who was there in 2010 is going to take that game for granted. And that includes Nick Saban. It doesn't matter what the sports writers, the fans, whether they take it for granted or not. But Nick Saban was there and knows that it's a tough place to play. I think the Mississippi schools are going to take a step back this year. I just have that feeling. Doesn't make it any more pleasant when the cowbells start ringing. But so if you ask me to rank them, I'd probably rank them A&M, Auburn, South Carolina, and State. But, Auburn could be anything. That could always be the toughest one. And that South Carolina trip, hard. I don't know that Stephen Garcia Lightning will come down and strike in the same place. But it could. So, and again, and this is something Alabama's had to deal with. This isn't something new. But all 4 of those stadiums, even with the schedule that Texas A&M has, all of those stadiums, that's the biggest game of the year coming in. So Alabama's going to have to deal with that. But that's how I'd rank them right now, would be A&M, Auburn, South Carolina, and Starkville. But even at the bottom of that list, even Starkville's not an easy place to play. So,
yeah, I don't know if the NFL draft was viewed in the same way by Mississippi State fans as it was, say, Alabama fans, right? You had 3 first-round picks from that Mississippi State team of 2018, and you went 8-5 in Joe Moorhead's first season. I don't know if those things match up, right? Like Mississippi State fans would like, and then to consider the potential drop off from guys like that to the next group at Mississippi State, and how well they can sort of replenish that. And that's before you get to the quarterback position. Although I think the gap between Nick Fitzgerald and Keaton Thompson, Cecil, might not be as big as some people are anticipating.
May not be. Nick, tough as nails, had his limitations, but now what they're not going to have is Simmons and Sweat. That's what's hard for anybody to replace, and a lot of other defensive players too. So again, it's going to be such an intriguing year in the league with the quarterback, with who I wrote a little bit from Baton Rouge about how, the West is either going to stay the way it is, and Alabama's going to stay dominant, through with two in next season, and Alabama's going to stay dominant after that, or there's going to be a shift in 2020. And that's what Auburn, A&M, and LSU in particular are looking at. That's when Alabama's going to be more vulnerable. New quarterback, they're going to lose once again. Several underclassmen to the draft. I couldn't put a number on it, but you can just look at the roster and see a few. And the way A&M's been recruiting, the way LSU's been recruiting, Auburn, again, they're always kind of in that mix, although their recruiting has not been what the other three have been able to do. So I think that's the time frame that they're really looking at. If Alabama wins it in 2019 with the offensive firepower that they've got, you just say, well, they just another great year. But then in 2020, when they go to LSU with a new quarterback, when they've got Georgia on the rotation from the East, then that's when I think that's the year that people think, if it's ever going to change under Nick Saban, that would be the year that ground could be made up.
Cecil, let's talk some college basketball. And right now, that's pretty much focused upon that federal trial in New York City, which is now in the hands of the jury, the bribery aspect of those trials involving Christian Dawkins, the former agent, among others. The most newsworthy items, of course, the programs that seem to be most prominent in all this, specifically, as you said a week or so ago, the biggest loser to this point has to be Arizona. I mean, you got Book Richardson, the assistant coach, on a wiretap admitting to paying players, not only himself, but Sean Miller, the head coach, directly paying DeAndre Ayton. But I would contend, Cecil, in hearing what we've heard anyway, what's been alleged, that Will Wade's the biggest loser in all this, because he apparently paid twice as much, allegedly, for Naz Reid than what Sean Miller paid for DeAndre Ayton. Cecil.
Well, again, he apparently, if everything is to be taken at face value, he's the mark at the table. He's pushing all in every time on a pair of threes. Hit me. He's hitting on 19. So we'll see. Very complicated thing that people don't. Nobody is. The trial is not about whether NCAA violations. I think everybody in the courtroom agrees that NCAA violations were
level
committed.
1. Yes,
but by a variety of schools at a variety of levels. That's not what the government's trying to prove. I think the prosecution and the defense agree on that 100%. And I am now that it's played out, I'm frankly a little surprised that the judge didn't have Sean Miller come in there and testify.
He was mentioned enough. I mean, he was basically in the courtroom without being in the courtroom, Cecil.
And there's enough ambiguity in the mentions that it would have been interesting, obviously from a college basketball perspective, but also I think for the jury to hear his testimony. But nonetheless, he didn't. But and so I don't know whether the verdict. People are going to spin the verdict one way or the other. Either he's not guilty and nothing he said was true, or he's guilty, you can't believe a word he said. So I'm not as interested in the verdict as I am in how the NCAA is going to deal with. First of all, for an assistant coach to be saying those things, that's a violation. I mean, that is a violation. So you've got that on tape, on videotape, in sworn testimony, and so that's going to have to be dealt with. And then some of the head coaches are going to have to be dealt with. And then there's other schools that were mentioned. The they never revisited. The brief moment where football was mentioned was never revisited. Was never, and again, as to the scope of the trial, was never relevant. If an agent was whipping some money to a kid 8 years ago, then that's not really what they were looking for at this trial. So it's a fascinating situation. I'm yet to figure out what tremendous public interest is served by getting these. I guess these are, there's some fraudulent activity. But I think the schools who are categorized as the victims in this would far rather have had it never happen. So it's a fascinating situation from a legal aspect, but the interesting part for a college basketball person is where will the NCAA go from here? Not so much whether Dawkins and Code are going to jail for a while.
Yeah, it reads more like an NCAA investigation or an NCAA trial than it does criminal acts, because you said it. How the federal government views these schools is a lot different than how the NCAA is probably going to view them once we get through this stuff at the federal level, I would think.
I would think so, but again, there's been no very little, at least tipping of the hand by the NCAA, who I assume had at least had attorneys present, but I don't think had any administrators present. I think they were all at the Fiesta Frolic out in Scottsdale.
Cecil, is Alabama okay in all this from what you can tell?
I would guess so from the mentions. Again, if an assistant coach, Yasir Roseman's name came up, and then the testimony was that he didn't get anything. Now, again, it's a violation to ask, but you're talking about somebody who's no longer on the staff, who didn't get anything, so it's going to be hard to tie it to a recruiting violation per se. But again, as you sail into uncharted waters, who knows? But Alabama makes it. There's yet another trial, the Chuck Person trial, and we'll see how that works out. On the hierarchy of what was heard in that courtroom, I would say the least, because there were other coaches mentioned with Rosemond who were looking for resources, is how they put it, but didn't get anything.
Right.
And because these agents didn't think they could deliver any players. So that's a much different. There's never been an accusation that anybody from Alabama paid or directed Dawkins to steer a player to Alabama. Right. That hadn't come up in any of the court documents. So now there have been what sound like, and again, we'll see how it's adjudicated. This is just one impression. The fairly long-standing, this is how an agent tries to get a kid, money to the family, money to the girlfriend, money to the dad, type of operation. How the NCAA will perceive that, I don't know. I can't say. That's not, but it I can't say it's not because I don't know, but it shouldn't be, and has traditionally not been viewed in the same way as saying, I'm giving DeAndre Ayton or Brian Bowen $150,000, Nas Reed $300,000. Those are different type of allegations.
There you go. Cecil Hurd of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com. As always, Cecil, we appreciate the time with you. Look forward to doing it again real soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon, Travis.